Good morning and welcome to Daybreak. You're watching it live on A News and I'm here to take you through the day's top stories. So let's take a look at the headlines. A 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon has come into effect, Trump describing it as a historic day. Russia launches deadliest aerial attacks in months, killing 18 in Ukraine. And the International Atomic Agency says Europe could run out of jet fuel within weeks. US President Donald Trump has announced a 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon after intensive diplomatic efforts. The move raises hopes for easing regional tensions as Washington continues parallel talks with Iran. The agreement could also pave the way for rare direct talks between Israeli and Lebanese leaders on a longer-term peace deal. A News' Ube Shabanda reports from Washington.
A major announcement by President Trump on Thursday declared that the U.S. government has brokered a 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. The Trump administration has been pressing both sides to end the fighting for the past week, as Trump's envoys also continue to negotiate a potential peace deal with Iran in a separate track. President Trump has also announced that Iran has reportedly agreed to hand over its enriched uranium stockpile, which could mean that the U.S. is closer to reaching a long-term deal with Iran that would preclude another round of fighting. Senior White House officials said that President Trump spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu earlier in the week, requesting a ceasefire with Lebanon, where Israeli troops have been fighting Iranian-backed Hezbollah militants. Israeli officials have told the Jerusalem Post that the Trump administration wants the U.S. government to play an active role in supporting efforts by the Lebanese government to disarm Hezbollah. Officials believe that Iran's weakened military position following Operation Epic Fury helped create the necessary conditions to reach a ceasefire in Lebanon. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps was deeply intertwined with Hezbollah's financing and operations. President Trump posted on social media that the ceasefire came following calls that he held with the Lebanese president and Israeli prime minister, and that he would soon invite President Un of Lebanon and Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel to the White House for, quote, the first meaningful talks between Israel and Lebanon since 1983. As part of the ceasefire agreement, the U.S. will facilitate direct negotiations between Israel and Lebanon on the demarcation of their land border in order to conclude a comprehensive peace agreement. Ube Shabander, A News, Washington.
Now let's take a look at the story shaping the day across the globe. And of course, we head first to the key story that's making headlines today, and that's in Lebanon. The 10-day ceasefire begins as Israel agrees to US-backed deal. That's on the Washington Post, as you can see just here. And just as our correspondent in Washington said, it was brokered by the US and announced by Donald Trump yesterday evening in regards to the ceasefire, which will last 10 days, but could be extended, is what Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is saying, as it will create an opportunity for a historic peace agreement with Lebanon. Now, the Iran-backed Hezbollah group has agreed to abide by the ceasefire while demanding it must also include comprehensive halt to attacks across Lebanese territory and no freedom of movement for Israeli forces. Now, Netanyahu's troops will remain in the 10-kilometer deep area that is a security zone in southern Lebanon, which goes against Hezbollah's demands for them to withdraw. So we will be watching this quite closely, as it's quite a fragile ceasefire at this moment. But the US State Department says under the terms of the deal, the Lebanese government must take meaningful steps to prevent Hezbollah attacking Israel. And now, as you're seeing here, the Guardian website, and you can just see a lot of jubilation. There's a picture here coming up of the people in Lebanon understanding now that there is a ceasefire and an end to some of the strikes that they've been hearing. Now, also, it adds that Lebanon's security forces have have exclusive responsibility for Lebanon's sovereignty and national defense. And UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has welcomed the ceasefire and urged all actors to fully respect it and to comply. Now, though that's what we currently know. What we don't know are what the next steps will be. We know that Trump says that he has invited the leaders of Israel and Lebanon to the White House, but nothing has yet been confirmed. But there have been scenes of celebration, as I mentioned here, of relief from people who've been displaced by the war and the ongoing fighting there. And just to add that the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah is very fragile, and the Lebanese army have already said that they believe that Israel has committed violations to that ceasefire that took place at midnight, including intermittent shelling of several southern Lebanese villages. So we'll keep you up to date with regards to that. We also have a guest to discuss this in more detail, but this is a breakthrough for both Lebanon and Israel, so we'll find out exactly what all this entails. Now let's go to the next headline, and that's on the BBC website, and that's still staying on the Middle East crisis and the war in Iran when it comes to fuel. Now, Europe has maybe 6 weeks of jet fuel left, and that's what energy bosses warn, saying that it was actually the International Energy Agency, the IEA, has warned of this, saying stocks would reach a tipping point in June if Europe was unable to replace at least half of its imports from the Middle East. Now, the Strait of Hormuz is the key actor in this, a key route for jet fuel out of the Gulf, and we know that it's been closed because of the 6-week war with the US and Israeli attacks, sending prices to really soar and promoting fears of shortages. Now, the IEA executive director said there could soon be flight cancellations if supplies continued to remain low and the Strait of Hormuz continued to be blocked. But on that, Trump has actually said that he believes that they're very close to making a deal with Iran, and Iran has agreed to hand over its enriched uranium, is what President Trump has said. So Trump here on France 24, Trump says Iran deal very close, may go to Pakistan to sign. So he said this yesterday evening to reporters outside the White House. His words were, "We had to make sure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. They've totally agreed to that. They've agreed to almost everything. So maybe if they can get to the table, there's a difference." So we'll see exactly how that pans out. But asked if he might travel to Pakistan, that's where he also told them he might go. It's all a questionable thing, but he said he might go if a deal is signed in Islamabad, is what he said. And just to add, there have also been, we know that the US has blockaded the Strait of Hormuz in order to put pressure on Iran, especially Iran's ports. However, 4 ships have crossed over the US blockade line after sailing from Iranian ports, and that's according to tracking data. So whether or not that's actually working, whether or not Iran has been able to sidestep that particular route, or US blockade is not working as much as they would like, is still TBC, as we're receiving different reports in different areas. Yesterday afternoon in the US, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was saying that the blockade was working. However, now it seems 4 ships have been able to pass through that. So we'll keep you up to date in relation to that. Now, the next story is coming from on The Guardian, and that's in relation to what's going on in Naples. Now, armed robbers hold 25 people hostage at Naples Bank before fleeing through a hole in the wall. If it sounds like a movie, it is not. It actually did happen. Several armed men robbed a bank in broad daylight and held 25 people hostage, making their escape route through a tunnel. Now, police surrounded the branch, which is the Crédit Agricole in the southern Italian city, and local outlets reported that they negotiated with the robbers before the hostages could actually be released about 2 hours into the robbery, and firemen could be seen smashing a window to bring people out and helping people climb out. And there were videos shared on social media in regards to this, and some hostages simply were able to shake off the glass shards and walk on out. Some were very disturbed by what happened, and others were just happy to make it through. One man later said that to a local news site that the robbers had locked them in a room, and that while they were there, they didn't use any violence, they just kept them away. However, what is unclear is whether or not the robbers managed to run away with any any money. According to certain sources, they did. However, the robbers are believed to have targeted a safety deposit box, but there were no cash inside the bank. So we'll provide you with more information in the course of the program today. Now we go to our next story that currently broke an hour ago, and that's on Reuters, and that's 8 people killed in helicopter crash in Indonesia's West Kalimantan is what authorities have said. So all people on board, which was 8, unfortunately were killed in this helicopter crash in Indonesia on Friday morning. Now the Airbus H130 helicopter lost contact on Thursday morning, 5 minutes after taking off from its area, which is the plantation area in Malawi. Now the location of the crash or loss of contact is in a densely deep forest. Like this is what we're seeing right here. It's very hard to locate and to find exactly where things dropped or exactly how it all unfolded. But that is where contact was lost with the steep hilly terrain. But we will be able to provide you with more information later on in the course of the program in regards to exactly what happened. But we do know that rescuers and search teams are currently out trying to get to the crash site and find out exactly what the cause was. Well, that's your press roundup for now. I'm now going to take a short break. When I return, I'll discuss the rest of the global stories. Don't go anywhere.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
We are in Somalia, a place often used through the illusion of constant danger.
Somalia is already facing security threats from groups like Al-Shabaab.
Currently, Somalia has 3.4 million people internally displaced.
Mr. President, I want you to know that I'm signing now Israel's official recognition of Somaliland.
We are expecting all member states of the United Nations to recognize Somaliland.
We strongly rejected Prime Minister Netanyahu's illegal aggression in recognizing part of Somalia.
A conflict will last. People make so much money on it.
This country sits at the crossroads between instability and order, isolation and connection, risks and responsibility.
Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak. Now let's have a look at the global stories. We turn first to the 10-day ceasefire agreement between Israel and Lebanon, which is being seen as a significant diplomatic step towards easing tensions in the Middle East. According to US President Donald Trump, the deal was reached through negotiations between the parties and will take effect on Thursday. However, positions remained deeply divided along the Israel-Hezbollah line, leaving the durability of the truce uncertain.
A 10-day ceasefire agreement has been reached between Israel and Lebanon. US President Donald Trump said the truce will take effect on Thursday, marking a temporary pause in the ongoing conflict between Israel and the Iran-backed Hezbollah.
I think they will. I think it's going to be, actually it's very exciting because it's 48 years. We're going to be meeting with Bibi Netanyahu, as you know, and the president of Lebanon. And I had a great talk with both of them today. They're going to be having a ceasefire, and that'll include Hezbollah. And I think it could be number 10 for me. I think we will have an agreement between Lebanon, and they're going to take care of Hezbollah. But they're going to be working on Hezbollah right now. But we'll have an agreement between Israel, very importantly, and Lebanon.
Will you support our debate?
However, significant differences remain between the parties. The Israeli army has said it does not plan to withdraw from southern Lebanon during the ceasefire. Hezbollah, in turn, stated that any deal must not allow Israeli forces freedom of movement inside Lebanese territory.
In these peace talks, we have two fundamental demands. First, the disarmament of Hezbollah. Second, a sustainable peace agreement, peace through strength. In order to achieve the ceasefire, Hezbollah insisted on two conditions. The first condition was that Israel must withdraw from all Lebanese territory up to the international border. The second condition was a ceasefire based on a quiet-for-quiet arrangement. I did not agree to either of these, and indeed neither of these conditions is being met. We are remaining in Lebanon in a reinforced security zone. This is not the 5 points that existed before Roaring Lion. It is a security zone that begins at the sea and extends to Mount Dov and the foothills of Mount Hermon up to the Syrian border. It is a security zone 10 kilometers deep, which is way stronger, way more powerful, way more continuous, and way more solid than what we had before.
The conflict escalated on March 2nd after Hezbollah launched attacks in support of Tehran. Since then, Israeli strikes have killed thousands in Lebanon and forced hundreds of thousands of civilians to flee their homes. Fighting continues, particularly in southern Lebanon, with heavy clashes reported in the strategic town of Bint Jabal. Israel has said it aims to establish a security zone in the area. Despite ongoing diplomatic efforts, the situation remains highly fragile and it is unclear whether the ceasefire will hold. Hezbollah said on Thursday that the presence of Israeli troops in Lebanon grants the group and the Lebanese people the right to resist, stressing that any ceasefire must not allow Israel freedom of movement within the country. Nabi Berri, Speaker of the Lebanese Parliament and an ally of Hezbollah, urged residents to delay returning to their towns and villages until the situation becomes clearer and the terms of the ceasefire are finalized.
Israel's ambassador to the UN says the military operations against Hezbollah played a key role in securing that 10-day ceasefire. He also accused the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres of drawing a false equivalence between Israel and Hezbollah. Here's more.
We got to this point as a result of the IDF's heroic actions in pushing back Hezbollah in many operations, including the pager attacks and the elimination of Nasrallah. But before we will speak about what we'll see in the General Assembly today, I have to address the outrageous remarks made earlier this week by the UN Secretary-General Guterres. On the very day Israel and Lebanon were engaged in historic negotiations, he went so far as to claim that Israel and Hezbollah have, and I quote, helped each other to destabilize Lebanon. That is simply false. At a historic moment, when the region is taking steps to a direct dialogue between Israel and Lebanon, when others are choosing progress, the Secretary General chooses to do exactly the opposite. Separately, what we are seeing right now in the Strait of Hormuz should concern every country in the General Assembly. Iran is trying to choke one of the world's most important waterways and turn it into weapons. They block ships, they harass them, then they name a price. Pay and you pass, refuse and you are stopped. That is not trade, that is economic terrorism.
Ukraine now is where we head to, and they are reeling after a wave of overnight strikes that hit several major cities, and at least 18 people were killed and dozens more injured. Let's take a look at this report.
Russia has launched one of its deadliest attacks on Ukraine this year, killing at least 18 people and injuring dozens in overnight missile and drone strikes across multiple cities. The assault hit the capital Kyiv, as well as Dnipro and the southern port city of Odessa, damaging residential buildings and critical infrastructure. In Kyiv, at least 4 people, including a 12-year-old child, were killed while dozens were wounded. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko said several of the injured, including emergency workers, were taken to hospital. Rescue teams also pulled a mother and child from the rubble of a heavily damaged apartment block.
It's just scary, that's all. I fear for our country and for everything we have. I feel so sorry for the children. So many people died today. Children died. It's so sad.
Elsewhere, at least 9 people were killed in Odessa and 5 in Dnipro, where strikes set residential buildings on fire. Ukraine's Air Force said Russia launched a large-scale barrage of ballistic and cruise missiles, along with hundreds of drones. While many were intercepted, several hit residential areas, causing widespread destruction. Meanwhile, in Russia, Ukrainian strikes on the Black Sea port of Tuapse reportedly killed a 14-year-old girl and a woman and damaged residential buildings. Kyiv said it targeted oil infrastructure, including facilities linked to Rosneft, as part of efforts to disrupt the Kremlin's war funding. The attack comes as Ukraine faces a critical shortage of air defense systems, particularly US-made Patriot missiles used to intercept ballistic threats. President Volodymyr Zelensky says the situation is at its worst. The latest violence follows a brief Easter ceasefire, with both sides accusing each other of violations. Efforts to negotiate an end to the war remain stalled, with Kyiv calling for a full ceasefire, while Moscow insists on broader peace terms first.
Turning to the impact the Middle East is having on energy prices, and Europe has been told that it could actually run out of jet fuel within about 6 weeks if global supply disruptions persist. The International Energy Agency has warned. IEA Executive Director said tensions in the Middle East, particularly risk to flows through the Strait of Hormuz, could trigger one of the most severe energy crises in history. He warned that prolonged disruption of oil and gas shipments could push up fuel, electricity and transport prices and may even lead to flight cancellations, with the wider knock-on effects for global inflation and growth. Turning to North America, and Todd Lyons, the acting director of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, known as ICE, is planning to leave the agency, and the transition is expected to take place at the end of May. Lyons, who led the agency since March 2025, is expected to move to the private sector. It is not yet clear who will succeed him as head of law enforcement agency, which has a workforce of more than 27,000 people. His departure comes amid growing backlash against ICE over its violent and aggressive tactics across the country. The former Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán broke his silence to a local news YouTube channel after his election defeat. In the interview on Thursday, Orbán said he was struggling with fatigue, pain and emptiness after the landslide loss. Here is what he had to say.
This pain has released a lot of energy from me, and it's not up to me to decide what to do. So I don't know if I can get happiness from life, beyond my family, or impetus, or ambition, or inspiration. No, I don't know that yet, because now, like I said, I'm struggling with fatigue, or pain, and emptiness, just like you. So maybe I'll have such beautiful days in the community, in my family for sure.
Now to East Asia, and all 8 people on board a helicopter were killed after a crash in Indonesia's West Kalimantan province, and that's according to authorities. The helicopter lost contact just 5 minutes after taking off from a plantation area in Malawi on Thursday. Rescuers later found debris in densely forested hilly area about 3 kilometers from the last known position. Search teams are working to reach the remote crash site as investigations into the cause continue. A fire at one of Australia's largest oil refineries will not lead to fuel restrictions, despite growing global supply concerns linked to the war in Iran. The blaze started Wednesday night at the Viva Energy's refinery and was brought under control after about 12 hours.
Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said a fire at the larger of the country's 2 oil refineries would not trigger any fuel restrictions as the government ramps up efforts to secure fuel supplies due to the war on Iran. The fire broke out on Wednesday night at Viva Energy's refinery in Geelong and was brought under control after about 12 hours.
The government's put in place the 4 stages in order to plan and in order to prepare for circumstances which are predominantly impacted by global events, not by events here. So the event here will not lead to any change. We'll give an update tomorrow about fuel supplies that are on hand. Fuel is continuing to come in, and indeed with yesterday's announcement of additional supplies, that is very positive.
Albanese returned early from Malaysia overnight after meeting Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim and securing a deal with state energy firm Petronas to supply excess fuel to Australia. The 120,000 barrel per day refinery is currently operating at reduced rates, producing about 60% of petrol output and 80% of diesel and aviation fuel after the fire hit 2 of its petrol processing units. The refinery supplies more than half the fuel used in Victoria, Australia's second most populous state, and around a tenth of national demand. Viva Energy CEO Scott Wyatt said work remained to restore the refinery unit safely and return to full production.
Now to some film, and CinemaCon in Las Vegas has taken place, bringing Hollywood studios and cinema owners together. At this event, there were a host of celebrities to preview upcoming movies for the big screen. Here's more.
The annual Las Vegas CinemaCon event, held at Caesars Palace, began earlier this week on Wednesday and continued through Thursday, with industry figures gathering to promote the upcoming summer releases. Stars including Nicole Kidman, Tom Cruise, Zendaya and Timothée Chalamet appeared on stage to present their latest projects as studios unveiled trailers and exclusive footage. The major film industry trade event aims to bring together Hollywood studios and cinema owners, where decisions are made on what will be shown in theatres over the coming year. On Wednesday, cinema executives and analysts highlighted the importance of the event in generating anticipation for the busy film season ahead.
Well, let's remember, one of the things that we're here to do is to celebrate movies and to get people excited for the upcoming movie season. You know, usually the kickoff of the summer is in May, end of April, beginning of May. It used to be the end of May, now it's sort of the end of April, beginning of May. But as we kick off into summer, the idea of coming together and celebrating the movies, bringing the stars, and that drives coverage and media coverage, and so that's good for the movies, and it's what makes movies an important part of the entertainment ecosystem.
A wide range of films were screened, from major sequels and action titles to family animations and comedies, raising expectations for a strong year at the box office.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the biggest summer since the pandemic, with an incredible variety of films, kicking off with The Devil Wears Prada 2, Mandalorian and Grogu on Memorial Weekend. Then you've got Christopher Nolan's Odyssey, Steven Spielberg's Disclosure Day, 2 big animated family films with Minions and Monsters and Toy Story 5. So I just think, front to back, this is going to be one of the best summers for movie theaters ever.
CinemaCon wrapped up after a couple of days of presentations aimed at drawing people back into cinemas.
Loads to see there, very exciting. Now we're going to take a quick break. When I return, I'll take a look at the regional headlines and I'll be joined by a guest to dig further into some of those stories. Don't go anywhere.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
and welcome to Primetime. What a show we've got lined up for you today. In a complex world, clarity is power. Two hours live, diplomacy dissected in a spin-free environment. That's Prime Time with me, Guy Schoen, weekdays on A News.
Welcome back and thank you for joining me this morning. Now let's go to the stories in the region, and we head first over to what is taking place in this Central Asia region. South Korea is stepping up its efforts to diversify energy supplies, announcing new crude oil agreements with Kazakhstan, Saudi Arabia and other major Middle Eastern producers as part of its long-term energy security strategy. Here's our correspondent with more.
South Korea has agreed with Kazakhstan on the supply of 18 million barrels of crude oil, according to the head of the South Korean presidential administration, Kang Hoon-sik. The announcement comes as Seoul outlines a broader energy procurement plan involving a total of 273 million barrels of oil from Kazakhstan, Saudi Arabia and other Middle Eastern countries through to the end of 2026, alongside 2.1 million tons of naphtha. Kang Hoon-sik made the disclosure following a diplomatic tour that included a visit to Astana, stressing that the new supply arrangements are aimed at strengthening energy security by using alternative routes that bypass the Strait of Hormuz. Until now, around 61% of South Korea's crude oil imports and more than half of its naphtha imports have passed through this strategic checkpoint. Within the overall framework, Kazakhstan accounts for only about 6% of total volumes with 18 million barrels, while Saudi Arabia remains the dominant supplier under long-term contracts. South Korean authorities say the contracted volumes could cover the country's energy needs for more than 3 months under normal conditions. Deliveries via alternative routes are expected to take around 50 to 60 days, similar to shipments from the United States. So while Astana is clearly expanding its export reach, it's still too early to suggest that South Korea is shifting toward Kazakh crude as a primary source. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Staying on Kazakhstan and its nuclear energy, highlighting the growing strategic importance of nuclear power in an era defined by energy transition and supply chain security. Kazakhstan are a leading global uranium country, and joining me now to discuss that is Zanat Mamankolov, Senior Lecturer at Eurasian National University in Kazakhstan. Welcome to the program this morning.
Hi there. Thank you for the invite.
My first question in regards to this, especially with their cooperation with the US and what the US wants to do in regards to nuclear energy and their coordination in that, is can Kazakhstan expand its cooperation with the US in nuclear energy without disrupting its basically carefully maintained foreign policy?
Yes, I think Kazakhstan can maintain the balance, and Kazakhstan is trying to do that. So what is the significance of the US partnership in nuclear area in this sense? So I think that United States pays lots of attention to Kazakhstan, not only because of minerals, but at the same time nuclear potential. So Kazakhstan is one of the richest countries in the world in terms of the uranium resources. At the same time, we have closely relationship with Russia and China. So recently we heard that the participation of Russian side in the construction of the nuclear projects is limited. So I think that the role of China might increase through Singaporean companies, and there's a talks that some South Korean companies, some French companies will take part in this project. But in order to maintain the balance, we need the role of the United States increasing in this area. So we're talking about the SMR, small modular reactors. So recently we have a very important meeting with the American side on the cooperation, on continuation of that projects, common projects in peaceful nuclear sector, right?
Yeah.
So the United States and Kazakhstan now are trying to cooperate in the sphere of development of civilian nuclear energy. So we need not like overestimate that, right? Because, you know, there are limits. So Kazakhstan is carefully calibrating its foreign policy and diplomacy in this area with the United States so that we can maintain these contacts. At the same time, we're building these conventional big nuclear plants with the Chinese side, and now we want to balance it with the SMR. I mean, these small reactors, which might be very relevant and necessary in the southern region of Kazakhstan. So I think that the relations are solid in this area. It's strategic.
Yes, and just on that, actually, I just wanted to bring that in. So in the sense of what you just described there, which is really interesting, do you think increased US involvement in Kazakhstan's nuclear sector might reshape regional perceptions, especially among neighboring powers with long-standing influence in Central Asia?
So I think, yes, the relationship with the United States in nuclear sector will impact the perception by Eastern countries. So Kazakhstan wants to be an energy hub, not only in minerals, but at the same time in nuclear area. So Kazakhstan wants to use it as a geopolitical diplomatic leverage in order to protect its interests and maintain the geopolitical balance. So I think that despite the rising tension between the China and West, so Kazakhstan seeks to maintain this carefully calibrated strategic balance. So US is very important because of the technological factor, because United States is a leader in nuclear technology and especially safety standards. So we need American expertise in this area. So at the same time, we need to say that Kazakhstan's expanded cooperation with the United States in the nuclear sector reflects growing US involvement in this great game, nuclear great game, but it is not so strategic shift. So Astana continues to pursue a multi-vector energy policy, balancing relationship, and taking part into the first program of the United States, but it is not decisive yet. So Kazakhstan delays firm commitments and avoids the risks of early adoption in emerging nuclear technologies. So I think that it is too early to say that Kazakhstan has placed its bet on SMRs or that the United States has seized the initiative in the new great game of nuclear energy in Central Asia, but Washington is displaying an interest in this game. This is clear.
And so how might you refer to then in relation to how sustainable is Kazakhstan's ambition to transition from a uranium supplier to a more integrated player in the global energy value chain? Do you think they're able to basically be flexible in both areas?
So I think, yes, Kazakhstan, as I said, pursues this carefully designed foreign policy in energy sector. So we're working closely with Chinese side through other states as well, Asian states. And as for the United States, I think that our nuclear strategy is not about only energy, it's also about geopolitical balance, technological modernization, and energy independence. So the partnership with the United States in this sense represents a new phase, a very important strategic step in Kazakhstan's multi-vector foreign policy.
And could you say this partnership could accelerate the adoption of advanced nuclear technologies, as you mentioned that the US has a lot of technical understanding and education in that? Do you think that will reinforce international non-profitization standards in regards to that?
Yeah, I think so, because not only the experts met this week, but at the same time, our Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister for National Economy met with Marco Rubio this week. So they also discussed this issue as well. So this is solved and discussed on a high level. So the United States role is strategic, but of course, as I said, limited. So Kazakhstan, as a middle power, wants to reach its strategic goal, which is strategic autonomy, right? So Kazakhstan's ultimate objective is not alignment with one side, but maximum independence in a competitive world by using its strategic leverage, one of which is, of course, peaceful nuclear sector.
And what is Kazakhstan's short and long-term goals when it comes to uranium enrichment, especially expanding beyond Central Asia and, as you mentioned, to the US, maybe even China, Russia? What are its goals?
You mean risks?
Yes, so its risks as well as its opportunities.
Yeah, sure. We have some risks. One of them is, of course, over competition. There are too many actors. There's a risk of coordination failure. The next risk is, of course, political pressure from Russia, China, and of course, Russia is losing its influence in this sector. The next risk might be, strategic ambiguity, right? We see what's happening in the north and south, the conflicts, right? So the hedging can be misinterpreted as unreliability by one of these powers. So as for possibilities, we can say that smaller states like Kazakhstan can manipulate this great power rivalry in their national interests. So I think Kazakhstan wants to capture this strategic important role in this transforming circumstances. So Kazakhstan is not a battlefield of a new nuclear great game. It's one of the most strategic areas which will define the peaceful nuclear production and, of course, projects.
And does the growing emphasis on nuclear cooperation signal a broader shift then in how energy security and geopolitical partnerships are being redefined in this era of decarbonization?
Yes, of course, one of the aspects is that Kazakhstan pursues new energy strategy like decarbonization. One of the aspects, of course, relates to this issue as well. So Kazakhstan has broader energy strategy. We're talking about not only the nuclear minerals, but at the same time about green energy, which we have lots of plants, which were discussed in your studio, through Caspian Sea, directed to the European Union, through Azerbaijan. So we have many multi-layered, very complex strategy. So in this area, I think Kazakhstan will be one of the most important strategic centers in the years to come through construction of these new nuclear plants, working with China, Russia, the United States, the European Union, at the same time with the Middle Eastern countries. So we have broader strategy.
And with that broader strategy, especially with what's going on with the Middle East and it impacting energy prices and a number of other issues that is impacting Europe and a number of Asian countries. How can Kazakhstan position itself as a leader, especially within its energy sector? Do you think that this is providing it with an opportunity to be a key provider in this particular area?
So Kazakhstan is not a passive actor, right? Kazakhstan is an active actor because it's a major uranium producer, one, and it sits between great powers, many of them nuclear superpowers, two, and of course Kazakhstan has an institutionalized multi-vector policy in this area. So Kazakhstan has also other strategic partners like Turkey and Pakistan and other states. So Kazakhstan, by these strategies, develops very wider foreign policy. It also relates not only the security, at the same time the supply chains and advanced technologies and safety standards. So I think that Kazakhstan can be a very important energy hub in the future.
Yes, well, we'll definitely be talking to you a lot more because that is a key area that a lot of countries are looking to, and Kazakhstan is definitely positioning itself within that framework. So thank you so much for joining me today, Mr. Marwankolov. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we turn our attention to Turkey, who has introduced a significant change to its visa policy. According to a presidential decree published in the official gazette, visa exemption for Australian citizens has officially come into effect. Under the new regulation, Australian citizens holding ordinary passports will no longer need a tourist visa to travel to Turkey. They will be allowed to stay in the country for up to 90 days within any 180-day period, including the transit purposes. Officials say the move is expected to boost tourism and strengthen ties between the two countries. Azerbaijan and the US trade more than doubled year on year on the first quarter of 2026. Trade turnover between Azerbaijan and the US reached $296.2 million in the first 3 months of 2026, marking a 2.2-fold increase compared to the same period last year. According to data from the State Customs Committee of Azerbaijan, trade with the US accounted for 3.14% of the country's total turnover during the first quarter. The surge in commercial activity comes as officials in Baku held discussions regarding the implementation of the Azerbaijan-US Charter on Strategic Partnership. Azerbaijan and Russian officials have inspected progress on key road and railway projects which form part of the components of the Zangezur corridor. The visit included a review of the newly constructed bridge over the Araz River, seen as a strategic link for regional connectivity. Here's more on that.
Recent regional tensions have once again demonstrated that transport corridors passing through Azerbaijan are reliable and resilient. This corridor continued to operate without interruption and fulfilled its function, further proving Azerbaijan's dependability. At the same time, Azerbaijan's initiative to allow transit shipments to Armenia was positively assessed. This step contributes to peace, regional cooperation, and more efficient logistics. The Agban Bridge has already been fully completed, and construction of the border checkpoint will be finalized in the near future. This route holds significant potential for linking the Persian Gulf with the Black Sea and is of strategic importance for the entire region.
We are at an international border crossing point, where a new bridge can be seen as a key component of the North-South international transport corridor. At the same time, this infrastructure is also part of the East-West transport corridor. The Russian Federation is highly interested in seeing this infrastructure become operational as soon as possible. It is modern and convenient and will particularly facilitate cargo transportation for Russian drivers to the Islamic Republic of Iran, as well as to Nakhchivan and further on to Turkey. We believe this project will be successful and will benefit all our countries through joint use and shared advantages.
Now staying in Turkey, the Antalya Diplomacy Forum opens today, bringing together around 20 heads of state and senior officials for high-level discussions on global challenges. Key speeches are expected from Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan at the opening ceremony. Our correspondent Katie Wilson has more.
It's a lovely day here in Antalya, and we're here for the 5th Antalya Diplomacy Forum, which kicks off today. We're going to head down to the venue in the next few hours, and throughout the day we'll be there bringing you all of the latest news and all of the latest lines. Now, the theme for this year's 5th Forum is Mapping Tomorrow and Managing Uncertainty, so a very apt theme given the beginning of the war between the US, Israel and Iran, which kicked off in February. And we're already hearing about discussions that have been planned on the sidelines of this forum about managing that crisis in the Gulf and planning for the future. So a very timely forum indeed. Now, what we expect at the opening ceremony is for the hosts of the forum, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan and President of Turkey Recep Tayyip Erdogan, to make a speech to kick off the forum, but they won't be the only heads of state in attendance. We're expecting around 20 heads of state to be there, including none other than President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev, who arrived in Antalya yesterday alongside his wife, the Vice President Mehriban Aliyeva. Now, this forum is a key platform for discussion. It's not a forum where decisions get made, but it's a platform for dialogue, and it's really key for global South countries and Turkic countries to have that platform to meet, to have dialogue. So there should be a lot of interesting discussions which take place over the next few days, and of course I'll be here all day bringing you the key lines from those. But for now, this is Katie Wilson and Elbruz Musayev from Antalya in Turkey.
Now to Armenia, and Azerbaijan and Armenia have recorded what initially appeared to be a rare step in bilateral trade. Baku reported its first imports from Armenia in March 2026. Officials later clarified the goods were Dutch roses transitioning through Armenia and recorded as imports based on early entry point. At the same time, exports to Armenia reached $5.7 million in Q1, including $1.5 million in March, just 0.1% of total export revenues. 14 people have been detained in Armenia as part of an investigation into alleged vote buying ahead of upcoming parliamentary elections. According to local media and the Anti-Corruption Committee, the suspects are linked to the Strong Armenia Party led by businessman Samvel Karapetyan. The payments were allegedly hidden as charity or salaries through linked NGOs. The party denies the claims, calling the case politically motivated. Strong Armenia remains a key opposition force ahead of the June elections. We stay with Armenia and we go to the Armenian Parliament, who has approved amendments to the law on audiovisual media, resulting in a ban on foreign programs that show signs of interference in the country's internal affairs. The new legislation specifically targets content broadcasts through the public television multiplex. Under the revised law, any foreign produced programming found to be meddling in domestic political processes or state sovereignty will be prohibited from national airways. Qatar's Emir Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani and Oman's Sultan Haitham bin Tariq discussed regional developments on Thursday, focusing on their impact on security, stability and economic interests. During talks in Muscat, the two leaders called for a lasting settlement to the ongoing US-Israeli-Iranian conflict and urged efforts to address the crisis as at its roots. They also stressed the importance of intensifying international efforts to ensure freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, safeguarding maritime transport flows and maintaining stable energy supplies. It's now time for a break. When I return, I'll have a full update on the latest headlines, plus a look at what's making the front pages this morning. Don't go anywhere.
Hello and welcome to Primetime. What a show we've got lined up for you today. In a complex world, clarity is power. Two hours live, diplomacy dissected in a spin-free environment. That's Prime Time with me, Guy Schoen, weekdays on A News.
We are in Somalia, a place often used through the illusion of constant danger.
Somalia is already facing security threats from groups like Al-Shabaab.
Currently, Somalia has 3.4 million people internally displaced.
Mr. President, I want you to know that I'm signing now Israel's official recognition of Somaliland.
We are expecting all member states of the United Nations to recognize Somaliland.
We strongly rejected Prime Minister Netanyahu's illegal aggression in recognizing part of Somalia.
A conflict will last. People make so much money on it.
This country sits at the crossroads between instability and order, isolation and connection, risks and responsibility.
Watching Daybreak live on A News, and if you're just joining me, I'm your host Nadia Jani, here to take you through the top day's stories. So let's take a look at the headlines. A 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon has come into effect, Trump describing it as a historic day. Russia launches deadliest aerial attack in months, killing 18 in Ukraine. And the International Atomic Agency says Europe could run out of jet fuel within weeks. Now let's take a look at the stories making the front pages this morning, and we head first to Reuters in regards to what happened in Indonesia, where 8 people were killed in a helicopter crash in the West Kalimantan area. Now that's what authorities were able to tell us over the past 2 days. They said that it happened, the search and rescue happened on Friday. Teams tried to retrieve the bodies from the wreckage. Now, it was the Airbus H130 helicopter that lost contact on Thursday morning, 5 minutes after taking off from the plantation area. Now, one of the head of Indonesia's rescue team said the location of the crash or loss of contact is in the densely forested area, which you're seeing right now on the screen, and it's steep with hilly terrain, saying rescuers had found debris suspected to be the tail of the helicopter, approximately 3 kilometers west of where they lost contact with it. Now, the cause of the crash still remains unclear. However, there are local search and rescue teams heading out there to find out exactly what happened, which includes police and military personnel trying to get there, as it's quite a tricky area to find in relation to the densely populated area, which has a number of trees, densely the forest as well, and what it's been able to find. But we'll provide you with more information as we get it throughout the course of the day. We now go to the second story, and that's in regards to something that has been making headlines and has re-emerged again. So rescuers to use cushions in latest effort to save a stranded whale. So rescuers plan to use air cushions to attempt to free a humpback whale which has been stranded off Germany's northern coast for the past few weeks. Now, they have tried to move it and it has been stuck. You're seeing pictures right now of the whale inside in the northern coast of Germany, and the name of the whale is nicknamed Timmy by local media and was first spotted in the Baltic Sea, far from its natural habitat, at the beginning of March, and is currently stuck in the shallow coastal area off the island of Powell. Now, a private company plans to refloat the injured mammal and the seafloor by its flippers and onto a tarp attached to a tugboat, but officials say that it's unlikely that that will work, but they are going to try and see exactly what they can do in regards to it. Now, we know that the whale is injured and is still showing signs of life, but is severely weakened, and that's what we've been told. Now, they were having trouble with regards to this, but then 2 multimillionaires decided to step forward and to find another way to how they can rescue this large mammal and get it to further deeper into its waters and into its habitat. So just some pictures there so that you can see it. Okay, now let's turn to our third story this morning, and that's in regards to the Middle East. And Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire begins in Lebanon. Trump signaling possible Iran talks as well. So this is the 10-day ceasefire that was brokered on Thursday into Friday. This night, the actual ceasefire kicked off between Israel and Lebanon. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says it will create an opportunity for an historic peace agreement between the two countries, and says that they will abide by the ceasefire. However, Lebanon has said, Hezbollah has said that Israeli forces must leave and move out of southern Lebanon, which is not what Israel has done at the moment. However, the US State Department says under the terms of the deal, the Lebanese government must take meaningful steps to prevent Hezbollah attacking Israel. Now, we have further information in regards to all of this. We also know that over the weekend, hopefully it hasn't been confirmed, but talks are currently being drawn up in relation to Iran and the US trying to come to an agreement in regards to what is happening there, because they're currently in a ceasefire which ends next week, Wednesday. But we will definitely make sure how things go. But the current ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah is quite fragile at the moment. The Lebanese army has already claimed that on Friday Israel committed violations to the ceasefire, attacking one of its southern Lebanon villages in the area. But we have more details in regards to what took place and some extra information. So let's go to our correspondent in Washington with more information.
A major announcement by President Trump on Thursday declared that the U.S. government has brokered a 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. The Trump administration has been pressing both sides to end the fighting for the past week, as Trump's envoys also continue to negotiate a potential peace deal with Iran in a separate track. President Trump has also announced that Iran has reportedly agreed to hand over its enriched uranium stockpile, which could mean that the U.S. is closer to reaching a long-term deal with Iran that would preclude another round of fighting. Senior White House officials said that President Trump spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu earlier in the week, requesting a ceasefire with Lebanon, where Israeli troops have been fighting Iranian-backed Hezbollah militants. Israeli officials have told the Jerusalem Post that the Trump administration wants the U.S. government to play an active role in supporting efforts by the Lebanese government to disarm Hezbollah. Officials believe that Iran's weakened military position following Operation Epic Fury helped create the necessary conditions to reach a ceasefire in Lebanon. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps was deeply intertwined with Hezbollah's financing and operations. President Trump posted on social media that the ceasefire came following calls that he held with the Lebanese president and Israeli prime minister, and that he would soon invite President Un of Lebanon and Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel to the White House for, quote, the first meaningful talks between Israel and Lebanon since 1983. As part of the ceasefire agreement, the U.S. will facilitate direct negotiations between Israel and Lebanon on the demarcation of their land border in order to conclude a comprehensive peace agreement. Ube Shabander, A News, Washington.
Staying on this, the 10-day ceasefire agreement between Israel and Lebanon is being seen as a significant diplomatic step towards easing tensions in the Middle East. And according to President Donald Trump, the deal was reached through negotiations between the parties and took effect earlier this morning on Thursday for them. Now we turn to this particular report with more information.
A 10-day ceasefire agreement has been reached between Israel and Lebanon. US President Donald Trump said the truce will take effect on Thursday, marking a temporary pause in the ongoing conflict between Israel and the Iran-backed Hezbollah.
I think they will. I think it's going to be, actually it's very exciting because it's 48 years. We're going to be meeting with Bibi Netanyahu, as you know, and the president of Lebanon. And I had a great talk with both of them today. They're going to be having a ceasefire, and that'll include Hezbollah. And I think it could be number 10 for me. I think we will have an agreement between Lebanon, and they're going to take care of Hezbollah. But they're going to be working on Hezbollah right now. But we'll have an agreement between Israel, very importantly, and Lebanon. Will you support our debate?
However, significant differences remain between the parties. The Israeli army has said it does not plan to withdraw from southern Lebanon during the ceasefire. Hezbollah, in turn, stated that any deal must not allow Israeli forces freedom of movement inside Lebanese territory.
In these peace talks, we have two fundamental demands. First, the disarmament of Hezbollah. Second, a sustainable peace agreement, peace through strength. In order to achieve the ceasefire, Hezbollah insisted on two conditions. The first condition was that Israel must withdraw from all Lebanese territory up to the international border. The second condition was a ceasefire based on a quiet-for-quiet arrangement. I did not agree to either of these, and indeed neither of these conditions is being met. We are remaining in Lebanon in a reinforced security zone. This is not the 5 points that existed before Roaring Lion. It is a security zone that begins at the sea and extends to Mount Dov and the foothills of Mount Hermon up to the Syrian border. It is a security zone 10 kilometers deep, which is way stronger, way more powerful, way more continuous, and way more solid than what we had before.
The conflict escalated on March 2nd after Hezbollah launched attacks in support of Tehran. Since then, Israeli strikes have killed thousands in Lebanon and forced hundreds of thousands of civilians to flee their homes. Fighting continues, particularly in southern Lebanon, with heavy clashes reported in the strategic town of Bint Jbeil. Israel has said it aims to establish a security zone in the area. Despite ongoing diplomatic efforts, the situation remains highly fragile and it is unclear whether the ceasefire will hold. Hezbollah said on Thursday that the presence of Israeli troops in Lebanon grants the group and the Lebanese people the right to resist, stressing that any ceasefire must not allow Israel freedom of movement within the country. Nabi Berri, Speaker of the Lebanese Parliament and an ally of Hezbollah, urged residents to delay returning to their towns and villages until the situation becomes clearer and the terms of the ceasefire are finalized.
Staying on this, Israel's ambassador to the UN says the military operations against Hezbollah played a key role in securing the 10-day ceasefire with Lebanon. But he also accused UN Secretary Antonio Guterres of drawing a false conclusion in regards to Israel and Hezbollah. Here's more.
We got to this point as a result of the IDF's heroic actions in pushing back Hezbollah in many operations, including the pager attacks and the elimination of Nasrallah. But before we will speak about what we'll see in the General Assembly today, I have to address the outrageous remarks made earlier this week by the UN Secretary General Guterres. On the very day Israel and Lebanon were engaged in historic negotiations, he went so far as to claim that Israel and Hezbollah have, and I quote, helped each other to destabilize Lebanon. That is simply false. At a historic moment, when the region is taking steps toward direct dialogue between Israel and Lebanon, when others are choosing progress, the Secretary General choose to do exactly the opposite. Separately, what we are seeing right now in the Strait of Hormuz should concern every country in the General Assembly. Iran is trying to choke one of the world's most important waterways and turn it into weapons. They block ships, they harass them, then they name a price. Pay and you pass, refuse and you are stopped. That is not trade, that is economic terrorism.
Staying on the 10-day ceasefire and the implications of this, I'm now joined by political journalist Malik Jadeh from Lebanon. Good morning and thank you for coming onto the program with me.
Good morning. Thank you for hosting me.
My first question is, just because of how everything has really transpired over the past 24 hours, even less than, you're witnessing all of this in real time. How is the mood right now? You're currently in Lebanon. How are the Lebanese people reacting to the ceasefire?
Yes, so far, of course, there is still some uncertainty because as we saw in the past hours, despite the ceasefire, Israeli attacks were reported. So we have just 1 hour ago an Israeli attack which left some casualties in the south, which reminded us of the post-November 24 ceasefire, when Israeli attacks continued on Lebanese territory despite the agreement.
Yes, so people are still quite uncertain. Are there people still waiting to figure out whether or not this ceasefire is actually going to kick in? As you mentioned, only within hours you've heard of strikes happening in different parts of Lebanon. Are people a little bit more weary then into how this ceasefire goes?
Yes, so of course we saw that there's a lot of caution. So we saw some municipalities, even parties, calling for people not to return home, just to wait how the situation will unfold. But despite that, we saw some traffic yesterday toward the south, despite the fact that some areas are not even reachable because Israeli attacks previously destroyed some bridges which make the whole area inaccessible, but we saw many people trying to get back home despite the risks associated with such a move.
Yes, it seems that the ceasefire is quite fragile right now with everything that's going on. Do you think that this is a real pause that could lead to an end of the fighting between Hezbollah and Israel, or could you see things ramping up again?
I think that it's just a pause because, first of all, I think that Israel's objectives in Lebanon have not yet been reached. So, first of all, just 3 days ago, Israel was talking about their goal of taking over the town of Bint Jbeil, and the ceasefire happened, and Israel didn't yet achieve this objective. Second of all, I don't think that this time Hezbollah will accept to go into a ceasefire where Israel continues to attack daily like last time. So I think that the resumption of hostilities can happen just in a matter of days, weeks, but I don't see it as a stable ceasefire.
It's interesting because Hezbollah has been against the talks that the Lebanese government have been a part of with Israel, saying that it's a waste of time and not to go ahead with it. However, the talks have happened. Do you think it is going in the right direction? Obviously, these two parties haven't met in decades, is what reports are saying in relation to the relationship between Israel and Lebanon. Could these talks now start the peace process, do you think?
Yes, so far the talks has achieved the objective of reaching the ceasefire. Now, how it will go from here, it really depends on Israel's actions in Lebanon. So if Israel continues to attack daily or many attacks per day with casualties, I don't see how these talks can progress toward a final peace deal.
Yes, well, that's what everybody is trying to figure out right now. What are the main challenges to this? You mentioned that Israel has a number of objectives. It really wants to root out Hezbollah. Hezbollah obviously is out there making sure it's defending itself. This has been caused on by what the US has done in Iran and a joint attack with Israel. Where do you think this could go from here? Is there any light at the end of the tunnel?
So I think that Israel's main goal now is to stay in the areas that it occupied. I don't think that Israel will withdraw from these areas, which poses a huge problem because Israel is now 8 kilometers deep into Lebanon, controlling many villages fully. And I think that this is unacceptable, of course, to Hezbollah, which poses a huge problem for this deal because we don't know what will happen to the Israeli forces in Lebanon.
And just in regards to the US's position on this, the US and Iran are currently in talks. Their ceasefire came much earlier, a week and a half earlier than the ceasefire which has just taken place now. If talks do go in the right way and an agreement is made between Iran and the US, what impact could that have on Lebanon?
I think that Israel has been clear from the beginning that it wants to separate the Iran scene from the Lebanon scene. So I think that saying that, I think Israel, even if there's a ceasefire in Iran, it won't deter Israel from carrying out attacks in Lebanon. So I think that, and this is the problem actually, that if when an increase of attacks or an increase of tensions happen in Lebanon, then it would threaten again the deal between Iran and the US, because it risks Iran not making any progress not because of Hezbollah being attacked, and Iran was clear that it wants peace in the whole region.
Yes, definitely. And I guess with all of this, what is the Lebanon government's position in regards to this? They seem to be in the middle of all of this. They've got Hezbollah on one side, they've got Israel on the other, they've got the US, Iran. What is their position? What do they want?
The Lebanese government is trying to create like a balance in one side, not to provoke Hezbollah a lot, to not stir the internal tensions, and at the same time it is trying to not provoke Israel through making concessions, which did not start today, but we saw in the past month how the Lebanese government has done several concessions, from appointing first an ambassador into the ceasefire committee. And so at the same time, we saw that it did not use force against Hezbollah to disarm. So it's really an action of balance between the two to avoid external and internal escalation.
Yes, it seems to be a very hard dance that it's trying to do. So we'll definitely be watching closely in regards to this. But thank you very much for joining me onto the programme and explaining that, Mr. Jeddah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, a virtual conference on the Strait of Hormuz will be held on Friday, which will be led by UK and France and bring together around 40 other countries. The discussions will focus on maritime security, economic measures and coordination for a potential multinational naval mission. Our correspondent has more from Manchester.
French President Emmanuel Macron and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer are set to chair a virtual conference on Friday, bringing together countries willing to support a proposed multinational mission in the Strait of Hormuz. The initiative, led by Paris and London, aims to restore freedom of navigation through the key shipping route once security conditions allow, with both leaders stressing the operation would be strictly defensive and separate from ongoing military action. Discussions are expected to focus on 4 main areas: maritime security, economic measures, humanitarian concerns, and cooperation with industry. That includes the possibility of financial sanctions on Iran if the strait remains closed, alongside efforts to work with shipping companies to prepare for a safe resumption of transit. Talks will also look at securing the release of stranded seafarers and vessels, as well as coordinating international naval contributions for a potential future mission. Around 40 countries are expected to take part as the UK and France lead efforts to coordinate maritime security and stabilize global shipping routes. Diplomatic sources say Britain is leading the political track of the initiative, while France is focusing on military planning, assessing what assets participating countries could provide and how they might be deployed. The push comes as Western allies avoid joining US-led military action in the region, instead positioning this effort as a post-conflict stabilization mission. Zaina Farizadeh, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
Turning to the war in Ukraine, and the country is reeling after a wave of overnight strikes hit several major cities in Ukraine. At least 18 people were killed and dozens more injured. Let's take a look at this report.
Russia has launched one of its deadliest attacks on Ukraine this year, killing at least 18 people and injuring dozens in overnight missile and drone strikes across multiple cities. The assault hit the capital Kyiv, as well as Dnipro and the southern port city of Odessa, damaging residential buildings and critical infrastructure. In Kyiv, at least 4 people, including a 12-year-old child, were killed while dozens were wounded. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko said several of the injured, including emergency workers, were taken to hospital. Rescue teams also pulled a mother and child from the rubble of a heavily damaged apartment block.
It's just scary, that's all. I fear for our country and for everything we have. I feel so sorry for the children. So many people died today. Children died. It's so sad.
Elsewhere, at least 9 people were killed in Odessa and 5 in Dnipro, where strikes set residential buildings on fire. Ukraine's Air Force said Russia launched a large-scale barrage of ballistic and cruise missiles, along with hundreds of drones. While many were intercepted, several hit residential areas, causing widespread destruction. Meanwhile, in Russia, Ukrainian strikes on the Black Sea port of Tuapse reportedly killed a 14-year-old girl and a woman and damaged residential buildings. Kyiv said it targeted oil infrastructure, including facilities linked to Rosneft, as part of efforts to disrupt the Kremlin's war funding. The attack comes as Ukraine faces a critical shortage of air defense systems, particularly US-made Patriot missiles used to intercept ballistic threats. President Volodymyr Zelensky says the situation is at its worst. The latest violence follows a brief Easter ceasefire, with both sides accusing each other of violations. Efforts to negotiate an end to the war remain stalled, with Kyiv calling for a full ceasefire, while Moscow insists on broader peace terms first.
Turning to the global and economic implications of closing the Strait of Hormuz, Europe could now run short of jet fuel within about 6 weeks if global supply disruptions persist. That's according to the International Energy Agency has warned. The IEA executive director said tensions in the Middle East, particularly risks to flows through the Strait of Hormuz could trigger one of the most severe energy crises in history. He warned that prolonged disruption of oil and gas shipments could push up fuel, electricity and transport prices and may even lead to flight cancellations with wider knock-on effects for global inflation and growth. The Antalya Diplomacy Forum opens today, bringing together around 20 heads of state and senior officials for high-level discussions on global challenges. Key speeches are expected from Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan at the opening ceremony. Our correspondent Katie Wilson has more.
It's a lovely day here in Antalya, and we're here for the 5th Antalya Diplomacy Forum, which kicks off today. We're going to head down to the venue in the next few hours, and throughout the day we'll be there bringing you all of the latest news and all of the latest lines. Now, the theme for this year's 5th Forum is Mapping Tomorrow and Managing Uncertainty, so a very apt theme given the beginning of the war between the US, Israel and Iran, which kicked off in February. And we're already hearing about discussions that have been planned on the sidelines of this forum about managing that crisis in the Gulf and planning for the future. So a very timely forum indeed. Now, what we expect at the opening ceremony is for the hosts of the forum, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan and President of Turkey Recep Tayyip Erdogan, to make a speech. Expect around 20 heads of state to be there, including none other than President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev, who arrived in Antalya yesterday alongside his wife, the Vice President Mehriban Aliyeva. Now, this forum is a key platform for discussion. It's not a forum where decisions get made, but it's a platform for dialogue, and it's really key for global South countries and Turkic countries to have that platform to meet, to have dialogue. So there should be a lot of interesting discussions which take place over the next few days, and of course I'll be here all day bringing you the key lines from those. But for now, this is Katie Wilson and Elbruz Musayev from Antalya in Turkey.
You're watching Daybreak. We're going to go on a quick break and I'll be back shortly. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak with me, Nadia Jani. Now, let's go to a story that is making quite the interesting moves in relation to AI, and a surge in demand for artificial intelligence is driving a sharp rise in global electricity use, putting growing pressure on energy systems as infrastructure struggles to keep pace. Questions are emerging over how sustainable this expansion will be in the years ahead.
A new report from the International Energy Agency finds electricity use from data centres rose 17% in 2025, with demand expected to double by 2030. The surge is being driven by heavy investment from major technology firms whose combined spending on AI infrastructure topped $400 billion last year and is set to rise by a further 75% in 2026. While AI systems are becoming more efficient per task, overall demand continues to climb as usage expands and more energy-intensive applications come online. The IEA warns that growth is increasingly constrained by real-world bottlenecks, including slow grid connections and tight supply chains for key equipment such as transformers and gas turbines, delaying new projects. In response, tech companies are ramping up energy partnerships, accounting for around 40% of corporate renewable power purchase agreements last year, while also backing nuclear and advanced geothermal projects. The report also highlights a growing pipeline of agreements linked to small modular reactor nuclear projects, which has nearly doubled in capacity terms over the past year. At the same time, developers are turning to on-site gas generation and battery storage to manage rapid swings in demand, particularly as AI data centers scale up. IEA Executive Director Fatih Birol says countries able to deliver secure and affordable electricity will have a clear advantage in the AI era, adding, "There is no AI without energy." The agency adds that while rising demand does not automatically mean higher prices, large and rapidly expanding data centres could still pose challenges for energy affordability and grid stability without the right policies in place.
Now, it's not every day you see an 80-year-old president inside a gym doing a morning workout, but Brazil's leader Lula da Silva was filmed doing a number of exercises that would make you want to go back and limber up. His wife, First Lady Rosângela da Silva, did a live stream of his gym routine and can be heard saying right here, no PowerPoint here, no AI, this is it. Every day, my husband has been here since 6 a.m. exercising. He has already done 45 minutes on the treadmill, and now he is here. Who said he couldn't do that squat, is what she also added. This is live, people, this is live, is what she's saying, and showing you exactly what her husband has been able to do. Look at him go, goodness. The president also added that anyone who wants to live to 120 years old has to do what he's doing. Now the footage comes as Lula da Silva prepares for October's presidential election, which would be his 7th run for the country's top office.
Tamo forte.
That is very impressive. I mean, for 80 years, still going, and obviously still wants to remain in leadership. Well, thank you so much for joining me this morning. Please make sure you stay tuned to A News. We'll have a number of stories, especially looking at the ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel, not to mention the Iran and US talks, which we're still waiting for a date, as well as what's going on in Ukraine. So make sure you stay tuned to A News, and I'll be back on Monday to go through a number of key stories. Don't go anywhere.